Good morning. Stefan's here. Stephen. It's not Stefan. Oh, I read that too quickly. G'day, Stephen. Thank you for joining. It's the second last day of winter here in Australia on the Gold Coast. What are we looking at today? Second last day of winter. Weather says today 32 Celsius. Tomorrow, the last day of winter, 34 Celsius, 34 degree winter's day. How good is that? Going to be in the water. For sure in the water. Let me tweet the thing over here. That's tweeted. It's good. Jump into it. What are we doing today? Sponsor. Let's start with sponsors. Sponsor's got a good tie-in to the blog post I pushed out just today as well, which is good. Anyway, Stephen says here in the UK it's about 20. It's summer. Yeah, I know. I did have a lovely time. Last time I was in the UK was September last year. Lovely time sitting around a pool near Gatwick, and it was just over 30 degrees, and it was lovely. It was so good. I think the thing about places that are generally not as sunny, and I well and truly include Norway and a lot of Northern Europe in that as well, is that when the sun does come out, everyone's like, oh my God, it's sun. And everyone's like sitting out in the cafes or sunbaking in a park. I always find that weird. You never see someone in a bikini in a park here. So why are you at the beach, mate? What are you doing? But it's lovely because everyone's just outside enjoying it. And it's so normal here that it's just like, well, that's every day. It's just not a special thing. 300 days of sunshine a year we get here on the Gold Coast. Sponsored by 1Password Extended Access Management. Secure every sign-in for every app on every device. Let's do it differently today. Normally I go through and I read the things on the website, which I've done every week. So people know that. I think I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit and talk about 1Password and the President's Cup. Now, I did not know what the President's Cup was until I saw them pop up, them being 1Password, pop up as a sponsor, which I found quite fascinating. So the President's Cup is, I'm going to do it a very bad injustice now, a golf tournament in Montreal later next month. And, you know, when you think about golf, you know, a big fancy golf tournament, and I've played a bit of golf in the past. I'm not very good. I can hit a long way. I can't aim. That's the problem. I'm not a big golf watcher, but it's one of those, what's the right word? Very highbrow sports, you know, very kind of fancy sports. And, you know, the sponsors are always like Rolex. So Rolex is a sponsor of the President's Cup. And right alongside Rolex is now 1Password, which I find fascinating. Of course, I'm trying to read all of these things, you know. So, why would you? Interesting. Why do you position up there with Rolex? Who knows? I don't know anything that you guys don't know in terms of what that might indicate. I can speculate. But it's very, very cool to see 1Password have a position of prominence that is going to reach so many people. So they've said it'll reach tens of millions of people will be watching this golf tournament and seeing 1Password and maybe making the whole concept of a password manager a bit more of a mainstream household idea. Now, of course, in the context of sponsorship at the moment, it is Extended Access Manager. It is them. It is securing every device, which, of course, is also a very important thing. And I think, again, putting that brand out there and getting that massive amount of recognition has got to be a positive thing in terms of helping more people understand what 1Password is, and that it's not just about passwords anymore either. Steven says, I'm really great at pitch and putt golf. Isn't that just putt-putt? The aim is to get the highest score, right? Yeah, well, no. My problem is that I'm too competitive at everything. And if I'm not doing it well, I'm my own worst critic as well. So the last time I played golf was with my father and Jacob Bradford, the manager of NDC conferences. It was here in Australia. I want to say it was about 2016, 2017. And I had to stop myself from playing. I drove the buggy. because I was just going to completely lose my mind if I kept trying to hit that ball. It was ruining an otherwise nice day out the golf path for me. I think Dad and Jacob really enjoyed it. All right. Speaking about ruining things, Telegram and platform content responsibility. Oh my God, this went right off the rails. Let's go back a little bit, just as a general set of principles, and then we'll get into Telegram and Durov and all the rest of it. The internet's a very global place. People come from everywhere and communicate via internet channels. Now, we've had the concept of having hosting providers and websites and all the rest of it for, let's call it 30 years for the moment. And of course, anyone can go and stand up anything. By doing so, there are certain things that break laws. And the laws aren't always consistent either. For the most part, for us and Stephen's in the UK, they're pretty much on the same wavelength, pretty much the same sort of social ideals and everything. Slightly different laws, but I think we have the same broad buckets of this stuff is totally fine, this stuff is totally not fine, and there's a bit of grey area. Other parts of the world are different. Other parts of the world have different restrictions on the things that you can and can't say. Obviously, freedom of press is a massive one there. And so we get into this really odd space of you've got a global platform with people anywhere, and if I build a website and put it out there, like have a campaign, whether you come from the Gold Coast or the UK or China, it's the same thing and it's the same experience, but you might be coming there with very different sets of expectations and local laws. The idea that you can just publish anything to a platform doesn't really fly, either as an individual or a platform provider, and this is where we start getting into the rub. There is this belief among some that there is no responsibility whatsoever on the platform provider if those using the platform do illegal things. And of course, the two big illegal things, well, let's call it probably the three big illegal things that come up very frequently and will come up as it relates to Telegram, is child sexual abuse material, terrorism, and the trading of illicit goods, notably things like drugs. I'm sure there's arms and so on being traded as well, but I would imagine it's not as big a problem as the drugs being traded and also the data breaches. A lot of data breaches being traded on these platforms. Now, think about all the different social platforms that we have at the moment. There's always a point at which you cannot post stuff there. Now, it's a little bit different based on some of those platforms. Some of them have changed a little bit over time. Think about the stuff that Twitter would bin 3 years ago that it won't bin now. And this is not sort of extreme stuff. It's not like, yeah, the CSAM's okay now, but it wasn't before. It's not that sort of extreme stuff. It's the more nuanced things around whether something is defined as hate speech, for example. The point is it changes over time, but there is always a point at which every one of these platforms says, that's too far. You've got to remove that. There's a really good reason for that. If you don't do that, someone will force you to do that, or they will make your platform unavailable. So, this is what happens with every single one of these global platforms. And we've seen so much news before where, and I'm going to try and avoid specific examples, otherwise someone will pick it up and go, yes, but this had a nuance there or whatever. There is all these examples of cases where one of the major tech platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, like you know what we mean, where they'll say, we have removed content or blocked access to content in a certain part of the world because of requests from government. We may not agree with it, but we have done that simply because we want to still be able to be in that country. And if we don't do that, we won't get to be in that place. There is platform moderation. Also, arguably, when you look at the really recalcitrant bucket, the big stuff that I just mentioned before, the stuff that everyone agrees with is bad. It doesn't matter where that platform is. If you're posting stuff there, or rather, not you, you're all good people. If someone is posting the really bad stuff there and the platform doesn't do something about it, their hand will be forced. They're like, this is not a negotiation. It will simply happen. So, with that background, let's talk a little bit about Telegram. I'm going to speak largely from my own experiences here, but I think I've got a fairly well-rounded experience with that versus the other platforms. When we use something like Signal, it is very much a peer-to-peer discussion. And of course, something like Signal is end-to-end encrypted as well. So you and I have a discussion, and it's you and I talking about anything from a kid's birthday party through to the really evil stuff. But it is a conversation that is private between parties. It's the same if I go to iMessage. It's the same if I go to Facebook Messenger. Those things are communication platforms between discrete individuals. Telegram has channels. Telegram has a lot of content that is open. Let's go jump into Telegram and have a look at some of the stuff. A lot of content that is open to different people. Now, what I mean by that is people can come along and they can consume that information like they would from, say, a social media account. You can browse by anonymously and look at my Twitter account. I'm not posting things to you. I'm posting things to a broadcast platform. I'm looking at Telegram. There's a bunch of channels that I follow because they're data breachy stuff. Now, let's have a look. Some of these are in Russian. I can't tell you too much about those. And I'm obviously not going to read them out because it is a bunch of content that has been illegally obtained. Now, this is just the stuff that's in my wheelhouse. It's the data breaches. You know, I'm looking here at all these different things that are for sale. Black Friday offer. Subscribe to VIP channel. What do you get for that? That looks like advertising. Here, data breaches. Who's this one? Selling full data breach of pureincubation.com. Okay, that's been posted here. Someone else. Oh, wow. There's 152 gigabytes of KYC Philippines data. And it's just file after, as best I understand, I don't think I've really posted anything to a channel before. But it looks like you can post up to 10 files per channel, up to 2 gig each. So here's, when I say per channel, per post, here's lots and lots and lots of Telegram channel posts with 10 2 gigabyte files on that all form part of apparently the KYC Philippines data, 152 gigabytes worth of data. That's published and broadcast to the world. Now, there is a report button here. You can report a channel. You can report content. I'm sure you can report individuals as well. And there's inevitably a question around how much action is taken when that happens. I would argue, based on what I see here with these channels, that either no one's reporting stuff that's very, very, very well known, or no action is being taken. And I have a feeling it might be a little bit of the both of them. So let's get to the Telegram Durov situation. Everyone by now probably knows the guy was arrested, founded Telegram, joint Russian-French citizen, zipping in his private jet, gets picked up, and is now in custody with charges. Let's try and find the conversation here. I put out a tweet which I thought was painfully obvious, painfully obvious, and it has unleashed the hordes, so to speak. Let me find that message. You'd think I'd prepare these things in advance, wouldn't you? That was me complaining about surveys. Wow, I've got a lot of people join in complaining about surveys. This was a tweet. You know, every time you buy something now, you get a survey. I try really hard to trim the amount of crap that comes into my inbox to try and make sure I can just focus on the things that are important. And the number of surveys I get now, apparently everyone hates them. So look, if you're doing surveys, just understand everyone hates them. Okay, so I've quote tweeted Telegram Messenger. Now, this was a few days ago. So here is the message from Telegram after Durov got arrested. There's a 5-point tweet here. So let's go through it. First point here. Telegram abides by EU laws, including the Digital Services Act. Its moderation is within industry standards and constantly improving. I have no comment on that. That is obviously the position that you would want to take. Number 2, Telegram's CEO, Pavel Durov, has nothing to hide and travels frequently in Europe. Okay. Number 3, this is where the problem is. It is absurd to claim that a platform or its owner are responsible for abuse of that platform. This is not going to fly. And this was the tweet that I put out there. I said, this one's not going to fly. It is absurd to claim that a platform or its owner are responsible for abuse of that platform. Now, maybe there's a very small nuance in the term responsible for. If they provide the platform Telegram and someone comes and does the naughty things on there, Telegram is not responsible for the naughty things, but they will be held accountable for dealing with it. And that is the context in which people responded to this, because we then had a huge amount of feedback from people. I mean, we've got, what's the stats on this? 175,000 views on this tweet. A huge amount of feedback from people that were very much of that extreme view that you should pretty much be able to put anything you want on these channels and then have no action from the provider of the channel. And of course, it all ends up in the free speech bucket. Should be able to say whatever you want. Also, a lot of people saying, well, Facebook, for example, can do whatever they want and are not responsible for it. Or rather, people can do whatever they want on Facebook, and Facebook themselves are not responsible for it. And this is just not true. Over and over again. I replied to someone here because this is Lisa Forte, who was wonderful, by the way. She said, seems to work for Meta, and she did have a lot of laughy faces after it. And I sent back a response from a news article here where Zuckerberg is literally saying Facebook is responsible for the content on this platform. So we've got the likes of the head of Facebook saying, we are responsible for what people post on our platform. And then you've got Telegram going, it is absurd to claim that a platform or its owner is responsible for abuse of that platform. Now, again, maybe that little nuance is abuse of. Whichever way you define it, the constant we come back to is that the platform providers have got a responsibility to moderate the content that's on the platform. Now, everyone who then got uppity and went, well, what about Signal? It's very different when you have, because of course we got into the whole backdoor thing. It's always with backdoors. It's very different when you have a genuine E2E messaging platform between discrete parties, where really the only way to do moderation is on the client itself, where the content is in the clear, which is then a whole other can of worms. It's a very different story too. You've got a situation where you can publish content on a platform to the masses, where it is available to everyone by design in the clear. There's a completely different set of moderation opportunities that are available there. What are some of the responses here? There were angry responses too. This person, sorry, Troy, I think you got the wrong take on this. Would any online business be viable if it was responsible for users who abuse the platform? You might stretch the example to suggest the electricity provider is also partly to blame. No. No, that just makes no sense. And someone else here saying, a backdoor is a backdoor. Blatant human rights violation, disguised as will someone think of the children. So much of this is literally published publicly to the world. This is not a backdoor. This is not compromising the privacy of discussions. This is literally content which is so easy to observe and is so illegal in nature. Someone here, why will it not fly? If they're not actively encouraging illicit use, then how is it any different from services offered by AT&T? Now, I heard this argument a lot. People will use the service however they use it. The only difference here is that they will not breach privacy and share their data. That's different. So the argument here is that how is this any different to, why aren't you arresting the CEO of AT&T? Because people have discussed blowing stuff up via the phone. Well, again, it's not the same having a discrete conversation between parties. Telco is a little bit different because you can get in the middle of communications. It's obviously not E to E when you have a normal phone call. But it's a completely different premise to if AT&T then provides a platform where people can converse in the public space and put content of a highly illegal nature. It is just an incommensurate comparison. I listened yesterday to the Risky Business podcast from this week, and Patrick Gray and Adam Barlow had a really, really good discussion about this, which is very much along my views as well. I think they probably articulated it a little bit better between the two of them, bouncing it backwards and forwards. Have a listen to that. That was really good. There's someone else here. This is where it just doesn't make any sense. I just feel like it's their first time arguing for some of these people. It would be absurd to hold the governor of New York culpable for all acts of crime committed by each and every citizen within the state. Arresting the CEO of a social media company for the actions of their users instead of taking action against users themselves is absurd. But it's not. and now that I'll back it back just one notch in terms of arresting the CEO. There's obviously a lot of different angles to this, in part because the guy has Russian citizenship, in part because there's all of these discussions about how much influence or connection is there to Russian FSB and the government that we don't get along with so well at the moment. There's also, every time we have politics, there's also the question of alternate motives. It's messy, don't get me wrong, but there's also no doubt that there has to be some responsibility on behalf of the platform providers for the content that is posted there. Now, that doesn't mean that when someone posts terrorism information, then the CEO of the company is responsible for the terrorism. It means that they're responsible for a platform that is enabling that without moderation. Now, you do kind of wash your hands of it a little bit if you do have a genuine E2E platform. Now, I haven't gone into the cryptography of this, but apparently the E2E claims are flaky at best. And of course, a bunch of content is hosted and is designed to be public to everyone deliberately. Now, that's not E2E. Once it sits there somewhere unencrypted and public for all. Anyway, we'll see. I know he's had the charges have actually been released now. I did read through them the other day. They seemed really, really bad because I think it included things like money laundering as well, which I assume was in reference to people using the platform for organized crime and money laundering. So we'll see. But as I started out with this whole thing, different parts of the world have very different regulations and laws, obviously. And obviously the French here have taken the view that this violates things in ways that might not violate in Australia or the UK. I don't know. Anyway, that'll be one to watch. Interestingly, you get the same people claiming that, say, Ross Ulbricht, Ross Ulbricht, founder of Silk Road, just provided a platform to people. Release Ross Ulbricht. I think Trump has actually said he'd let Ross out. Remember, Ross tried to have like 6 people killed as well, as well as just running the Silk Road platform. He did try to do executions. There's a really, what's the book I'm thinking of? There's a couple of really good books and documentaries, particularly around how they faked the execution of someone and then sort of sent the evidence back. Like, there was no doubt he was trying to have people taken care of. It's a mess. Oh, comments. Andrew says there's a difference between not complying with legal requests to provide data, which is looking like the actual charges they are going for, and not moderating content. Yep, agree with that. Signal complies with requests with the little data they have. And of course, this is part of their sort of get out of jail free card, for want of a better term. The little data they have, it's genuine E2E. So what do you actually have? And the discussion here shouldn't be about should you or should you not comply with legal requests. It's like, yes, you should. Like, they're really your only options. Now, you can argue whether they're legal or not, and I'm sure that many of the big tech companies do that. But clearly, I mean, a good example here is like Proton Mail. Proton Mail is based in Switzerland. There's this perception from people that it's entirely private and never shall my communications or anything be handed over to law enforcement. Well, if they get legal requests from Swiss authorities, then they do hand that information over. They're complying with local laws. Matthew, hey Troy, finally got to catch you live. G'day, Matthew. Do agree with what you say, yet the cutoff line is hard to place sometimes. But places like Facebook don't hire staff to deal with posts, etc. for no reason. And I agree, like it is a hard thing. It's a little bit like, I don't know who to attribute this to, but there's that old saying, it's like, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it, right? Because when does it go from like art to porn? It's just not a clear line. And inevitably you do get lawyers arguing backwards and forwards about whether something violates the local laws of the country or whether the platform has an obligation to support it. It's a very, very messy area. And like I said earlier on, there are buckets that are very clearly legit, very clearly illegit, and then a whole bunch of grey. And I think that the problem that we're having here is that there is so much content on Telegram, which is the very clearly illegit bucket. Like there's just no arguing about particularly those three classes I mentioned earlier on. Let's move on. I was going to say something happier, and then I just saw the next thing is procurement departments. Jeez. All right. This is painful. Now, very often I write blog posts when I'm angry. Or, in fact, okay, let's rephrase it. When I am emotional about something, now that emotion may be anger, as it was in this case just here. It may also be that I'm just super excited about some new technology I've seen. All I want to do is just write about it in order to help me learn and get better at it. The post the other day, the procurement department post, is purely an angry post. Now, when I wrote this up, I was also conscious that by writing this, I will get feedback that will help me try and solve the problem. And it has, and I'll talk about how that helps solve the problem in just a moment. But let's go through the problems here. I sort of led by saying credit cards are great. Bear with me. Just to be clear, running up credit and not clearing it monthly and accruing high interest debt is terrible. Never do this. Never, like, if I know it's called a credit card, but I'm not sure that I've ever used it. If I don't have the money, I'm not spending it. Little financial tip. Anyway, Stephen's felt my pain reading the procurement stuff. So what I love about credit cards is watch, phone, go into a store, pretty much anywhere in the world now. There's a little bit of time there. It's like a lot of stuff. Where was it? Oh, Japan. So when I was in Japan earlier this year, Apple Pay doesn't work. So I carry the physical card around. But for the most part, it's a tap and go. It's a dead easy thing. You as the provider of the service, I used a noodle bar example here in Hong Kong. You own a noodle bar in Hong Kong. You pay for your noodles. They know they can give you the noodles because so long as the credit card passes, you're good to go. They then have the money. It's fine. There's been no exchange of documents or formalities. It's wonderful. In the same way as cash is, except it works when you're not there in person, because we've all done this before. We put our credit cards onto a website and we bought stuff. It works so easily and so beautifully, and it doesn't matter what the currency is as well. I can go and buy anything. I'm telling you the obvious things here, but I'm going somewhere with this. I can go and buy anything from any website with my Aussie credit card. It will charge me in the local currency. I'll pay an exorbitant fee to have it converted back to Australian dollars, but I will be able to purchase the item. And it is so simple, and there is nothing else we have that does that short of cryptocurrency, and there's a whole bunch of other issues there. So credit cards are wonderful. Love credit cards. And then you get procurement departments. Now, I'm actually surprised I did not get into trouble, not even once that I know of, for using an AI-generated image of an old guy who I've referred to as Neville, who is the procurement manager in a large organization. And Neville's goal is to make your life hell. Now, you are either an employee at the company just trying to do your job, or you are me, where you're running a service that you've designed to be as frictionless as possible, and Neville just wants to come and piss in your cornflakes and make your life a misery. Keep in mind, I spent 14 years at Pfizer, one of the world's largest companies, with all of the processes that you could imagine, and having to go through procurement departments and having to go through what can you pay with credit card, what can you not. But also seeing that where so many organizations have a policy of I can't pay by credit card, got to be invoiced, 60-day net terms. Every organization at some point has sufficient motivation to break protocol. I've got to send an email to a customer. It's not a not a credit card one, but a customer who we are going to cut off because of simply just not paying bills for months for some services. And there's always an excuse up until the point where they don't have a choice. And then they find a way, which is fascinating. So you work for an organization and they say no credit card. Now, the Have I Been Pwned API goes back to having a credit card charge on it to 2019. It'd be almost 5 years to the day. It was August 2019. I remember where I was. I was sitting in an Airbnb in Oslo writing the code to do it. There's a whole other story about that. Anywho, so for the last 5 years, we've been taking credit card payments for as little as $3 something in order to use services. And we use Stripe, and Stripe is wonderful. And I want to reiterate how technically brilliant I think this platform is. It's awesome. It's got some gaps, which we'll come back to. But it's a technically brilliant platform. I love the APIs. They've got an awesome CLI, the way you can code against their application, test things like webhooks and callbacks. All the technical people have spoken to there, top notch as well. I have nothing but positive things to say about the mechanics of the way it works. So you've got this payment provider that works beautifully, is easy to integrate, great to code against. You've got this payment method, which is credit cards, which Stripe accepts very gladly, as well as accepting Apple Pay and Google Pay and all these other things. So really, you've got everything set up there for success, for people just to come and put in as little as $3 something and get their API key. And then Neville. Now, there's a couple of things Neville wants. One is he usually wants either a quote or an invoice before he can make a purchase. Now, this is not so much a Stripe thing or a payment thing. Let's just get through the mechanics of a quote, because we'll have people contact us and say, hi, can you please provide us a quote for, let's just pick the stupidest, lowest level example as possible. I want an API key for the Pwned One service that will allow me to do 10 requests per minute, $3.95 per month. Can I please have a quote? And we'll get tickets for this. And I'll go, well, why do you want a quote? The price is on the website. I've just gone to the website and I can see exactly what it... You want me to put that on a PDF with your name on it because reasons. If it's that important, print the bloody page out and put your name on it. Like, why do you want this? We end up only doing that because it's still a manual process. This is something we can automate. I'll come back to that. We only end up doing that for the higher tiers because we're not going to do that for the sake of $3.95. How much effort do you have to put in before $3.95 becomes stupid? Not very much. It disappears very quickly. Or Neville will want an invoice. And I kind of understand this insofar as that they want a formal document of here is what needs to be paid before they pay. The way Stripe works is, the general workflow is you create a subscription. Now we are talking about subscription-based services here. One of the epiphanies I had over the last couple of days is Charlotte said, you know, when you look at the way it's all set up, Stripe feels like it's come from a background where it's very much about making a one-off purchase of an item. You're integrating with the store, you're buying a t-shirt. You go and buy the t-shirt, you put your credit card details in, you get your invoice and your receipt and everything, and that's it. The B2B digital services ongoing subscription thing is where it feels a bit rougher, for reasons we'll describe in a moment. So the way the Stripe workflow works with Have I Been Pwned at the moment is, let's say you want your $3.95 a month key. You go there, you put your credit card details in Stripe. There is a customer that is created. There is a subscription that is created. That subscription has a product with a price. It is a Pwned One product, $3.95, recurring monthly. When that subscription is created, it raises an invoice. You have already put your credit card details in. This is all happening behind the scenes. Put your credit card details into the Stripe page, and that invoice is then paid, and there is a receipt, and you get it all at once. And all of this happens in the blink of an eye. So that's their workflow. So when we get to the point of wanting an invoice, it's a little bit hard because the invoice is generated when the subscription is created. So how do you have an invoice to give Neville without creating the subscription? Well, what we've been doing is we do create the subscription, and now the subscription has started. So Neville gets his invoice, and now the clock is ticking. We only do this for annual subscriptions as well when we do this manually. So Neville, you've got your invoice, mate. Your subscription has started. If you take 4 weeks to pay the invoice, 1/12 of your service has disappeared because you're going to be charged again not invoiced, charged, we'll come back to that later, in 11 months after you've eventually paid, because that's 12 months from when the subscription was raised. We had to, or rather the subscription began, we had to begin the subscription in order to raise the invoice. Quotes are a little bit different because you can always generate a quote, send it out, and then once it's approved, then you can raise the invoice and start this, or rather start the subscription, which of course can only be done if there's actually payment details. The reason I came to a bit of a head here is that it was August last year, we started to put a price on domain searches for the largest domains. So we said that 60% of the smaller stuff, keep in that free tier, 40% of the bigger stuff, start charging money for. 12 months ago today, most large organizations with a Neville are subscribing annually. So over the last few weeks, we've started to get all of these queries from organizations going, hey, could you please give us a quote for the renewal? It's like, well, you don't need a quote. Like, it's a subscription. It renews. You put your card details in. It's going to automatically renew. And yeah, we want a quote with exactly the same stuff that's on the website. Now, the problem is that in Stripe, and this is where we come back to the mechanics of how that service works, and I think just use cases that are not yet supported. Now, we did actually spend some time speaking with folks at Stripe only about 24 hours ago, actually, and they were wonderful. And they've given us some really, really cool ideas. But one of the problems that they quite frankly have is that you've got a customer, you've got a subscription. The idea is that subscription goes for however many years they want it to until they cancel it. That is the subscription. Every time it renews, it'll charge your card and it will send you both an invoice and a receipt. If someone wants to create a quote, we can create a quote, but there's no way of that quote then turning into the renewed subscription and raising an invoice against the existing subscription. We could use that quote to then create a new subscription. So now you've got two subscriptions, and then that would raise it. And you see how messy that gets? Because logically, it's just the one subscription. The company just wants a heads up. So I think Neville, you're making my life a nightmare, but I do think it's something that Stripe needs to have some support for. So one of the things that came out of this, which was really good, is someone said, have a look at their pre-billing beta. So they do have, and I'm not sure if it's going to do exactly what we want, but we are now on the pre-billing beta, where we can have a look at being able to bill for cycles of a subscription in advance. Again, I'm not sure that'll do exactly what we want, but I think there's some ways we might be able to hack around it. Now, I'm not done with Neville. So we start talking about credit cards. Neville's other problem is he doesn't just want quotes and invoices. He also does not like credit cards. Neville wants an invoice, and he wants your bank details, and he probably wants 60-day terms as well. And he probably wants the service. So please give me the service. We will start using it, and we'll pay you a couple of months later. So he wants to pay by bank transfer. We can't do that with Stripe. Now, in case you're going, well, hang on a moment, Stripe has virtual bank accounts. You can do that with Stripe. If you have an American entity, you can use virtual bank accounts. And where I think a lot of the pain is around Stripe is not so much them, it's the fact that they're working in a really heavily regulated industry. It's the finance industry. There are so many controls around that. Just think of the amount of KYC that happens, particularly in America. I spoke some months ago about Coinbase. Because I get donations in Bitcoin. Remember the thing that's meant to be like easy and anonymous? The KYC demands I got from Coinbase were ridiculous because American finance industry. It wasn't just like, please describe the source of the funds and everything. Okay, there's donations. You can see the little QR code on the Have a Been home page. It's tell us about all your existing assets that have got nothing to do with this, your existing investments, your net worth, like all of these deeply, deeply personal things. Please send them to the country on the other side of the world so that you can receive free and anonymous payments that are usually $3 something because it's like a coffee. So finance regulations make it extraordinarily hard. And I'm sure the reason why we can't just have a virtual bank account as an Australian entity charging US dollars, but then we get paid in Aussie dollars. And of course, we probably get a terrible exchange rate, probably not their fault. But we can't do this, which is enormously frustrating because it sounds like a beautiful model. So it looks like you can have a virtual bank account which has numbers that are unique that reconcile back to the invoice so that you can say to a company, hey, here's your invoice. You've got to pay to this bank account, and then reconciliation happens automatically. I love that idea. Can't do it here in Australia. It looks like bank transfer payments are available in, looking at the flags here, the EU, the UK, Japan, the US, and Mexico. I believe that is the Mexican flag. Can't do it in Australia. Australia does have a model where you can direct debit from an organisation's account. But if you reckon Neville doesn't like using a credit card, there's no way Neville is going to give us their bank account details and allow us to take money out of their account. It's just not happening. And apparently also, don't quote me on this, but Charlotte said, because we're charging in US dollars and we would be direct debiting only from Australian companies using this, which is a very small slice of our audience anyway, apparently we can't do it. So paying by bank transfer is just simply not possible at the moment. I'm just going to read the comments because I can see them backing up here, and then I'm going to go on further. Oh, Scott's here. I know he's going to complain about this. Stephen says, it was really odd for me last month seeing in Australia where there are sometimes charges for using credit card, debit card, whereas in the UK, there isn't. Cash and card price are the same. There is always a charge. Visa isn't doing this for free. Amex isn't doing this for free. See, eBay has recently just ceased their relationship with Amex because they obviously couldn't agree on terms. The only question is the fee absorbed in the price published by the merchant, or does the merchant then put it on top? It doesn't happen all the time in Australia. It does happen sometimes. I would actually like to see regulation where that doesn't happen. And while I'm on my high horse with this, I would also like to see regulation in America. Now we're booking all this stuff for the US, which we'll talk about in a moment. Because you go to a website and say, here's the price. It's going to be $100. So, okay, cool. Here's my $100. No. There's tax on top of that. Now it's going to be something else. So I think we should have, well, let's just all agree globally. The price that you advertise is the amount of money that will come out of someone's credit card. All agree? Good. Let's move on. It does happen sometimes. Abe says, CCs are great, except for payware surcharges. It's like stats on how much they make from paywave surcharge. And, you know, you are paying for this. And to Stephen's point just now, when I do see a charge for credit card, it's normally like 1.5%. Now, I don't want to give money away, but I also don't mind having a convenience factor here as well. And when you think about running a service like Have I Been Pwned, having online payments, it's really the only practical way of doing it. So to have to eat 1.5% in fees, which come off of pre-tax income anyway, so you've got to pay tax if you did keep that 1.5%, I'm okay with that. Simon, what would happen if you just said no to Neville? Now, this is an interesting point, and it goes back to my point I made before about when there is sufficient motivation. I've made a comment on the bottom here that it's something like 0.6% of our transactions come through resellers. We'll talk about resellers in a moment. It's actually more like about, I think, 4% of the revenue of the highest tier comes through resellers. And I did say to Charlotte the other day, I said, what if we just said no more resellers? Like we just chopped them completely. I don't think we'd lose 4%. I think we'd lose, for argument's sake, 2%. Because half of the companies that were trying to go through resellers who originally saw that as a viable option and now know that they can't do that, they'd find a way. They'd find a credit card somewhere. So I think the answer, Simon, is that if we said no, we would lose a smaller fraction than what the raw numbers represent at the moment. And I'd keep a lot more sanity. But there's just this bit inside of me that the person we're ultimately disadvantaging is the person who was me in Pfizer for 14 years, trying to buy stuff and trying to get my job done and seeing a service like Have I Been Pwned and hopefully seeing it as a really useful service and wanting to use it. And I feel bad telling the me of years ago that, no, you just can't use this thing because Neville. And that's Neville's fault, still. Stephen says, why can't Neville just take the first year's quote and change the years in the original invoice? Sadly, I know that's not really possible, but it is. You can edit a PDF. And I've said this before. It's like, just take the freaking PDF and just edit it yourself. Scott says, if the bank account details change the following year, Neville will not be happy. And so here's the thing, and I know Scott goes through this a lot with Report Your Eye, and he and I talk a lot about this, usually over drinks. I was certainly having one the other night, mate, when we were talking, and I was talking about Neville. One of the joys of paying by credit card is that in the case of Have I Been Pwned here, you don't get the service until you pay. You ever tried to just use Netflix for free trial aside? Just go, I would like to begin my subscription and I'll pay you later. No, you don't get to do that. You pay first and then you get the service. One of our greatest pains for us, and I know for Scott with Report Your Eye as well, is organisations that we bill and they pay in arrears because we have to keep chasing them. We've got one at the moment where they're getting invoiced monthly for a service and the last 6 invoices they haven't paid. And Charlotte's been chasing for months. And then they've just paid like 3 of them. It's like, where's the rest of it? Oh, we have an internal policy. Well, yeah, but you signed an agreement which said you'll pay within 30 days. Puts a huge amount of burden back onto us to chase an organisation. So that the whole idea of delivering a service after payment is made, just to my technical mind, is beautiful. Now, that the thing with Have I Been Pwned is, let's say you've got an API key and you integrate it into your application such that you are, let's pick an example, you're running an e-commerce platform. When a customer signs up, you want to know how pwned they are so that you can flag their account as a potential higher risk of account takeover. Now, that's a really great use case. If, to Scott's point, you're using bank account details and direct debits and the bank account details change, or if you're using credit cards and the credit card expires and you haven't gone and updated any of these things, or if you're waiting for the invoice, which is only issued when the next subscription begins, which means that the old subscription has ended and you haven't paid, you run the real risk of your key being revoked. And we've got a little bit of a buffer in there for these circumstances. But if your key gets revoked, then your integration fails. So it's like either pay your bill or your service stops working automatically. Scott says you have to send Neville your new bank account details on a company letterhead. Yeah, well. And you understand why, because there is so much business email compromise and financial fraud and everything else, which again is why the credit cards are so nice, because you're providing it to the service as the purchasing entity. You have a high degree of confidence it's legitimate. And also, if your credit card gets defrauded, you get your money back. Works great. Brendan says, shit, it's been roughly a year since I joked about doing a Google Apple regarding the naming scheme of a domain search subscriptions. 7 recharges, always aware of the charge, used to work in retail, and how it's absorbed in most UK places. Yeah, which is the 1.5% or something. Scott says, in the UK, the retailer can pass on the credit card fee, but basically none do. Well, not explicitly. That definitely increased their prices by 1.5% or whatever. The other problem is that it's not free to handle cash either. That's very true. I just don't think it's quite as clear as a line item. We both use these online services with credit card. Like, we see the line items of how much is charged for credit card transactions. So says, Scott, please say that you don't have a drinking game with Troy that involves taking a shot when you have trouble with the Neville. Jeez, we would be incapacitated very quickly. All right, let's talk about the next problem, which is the resellers. So resellers is a problem that solves another problem. Because Neville really wants to do bank transfer and just loathes the credit card, he goes to a reseller. And the reseller says, we will purchase the item from Have I Been Pwned for you with a credit card, and then we will invoice you, Neville, and you will pay us. But we're a reseller, we're not a charity, so you will pay more. And I got to be honest, I don't think I've actually seen how much more they charge. if you've ever bought a Have I Been Pwned subscription through a reseller, get in touch, because I would really like to see the invoice you got. Because we make a point of not giving resellers a discount. Now, I'm sure there's some business development manager, someone who goes into tech companies and transforms them and makes them squillionaires, that's looking at me saying you're an idiot. That's not how it works. And he's probably right. But when you build something that starts as a pet project and all you want to do is help people use the thing, it just feels dirty. If you're that business development manager, get in touch, because maybe you can tell me I'm completely wrong for all sorts of reasons. So every time a reseller says to us, what's the price? We go, well, it's on the website. Do you want me to read it for you? And I think anecdotally, based on what I hear, we've done a terrible job of actually pricing the thing and it's way too cheap anyway. So maybe they're just like, well, fine, we'll mark it. I don't know, maybe they mark it up 30%. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they're marking up 30%. So they come to us and they say, we've got this customer. This is a subscription that wants to buy. This is who the customer is. Please don't talk to the customer. Don't send the customer any information related to this deal. And we're just going, the price is on the freaking website. Like, they know exactly how much it would be if they went and bought it themselves. But Neville doesn't mind paying the surcharge. So they purchase from us. So the reseller, and there are a bunch of them around the world. There's a couple of dominant ones, but there must be at least half a dozen that we regularly have come to us. They often provide us with a credit card that has like a 2-week expiry. One of the things I don't like at the moment, and I really want to stop dealing with this, is they actually send us a purchase order with the credit card details in there. Now, they're only valid for a couple of weeks. And obviously they're tightly controlled in terms of what actually gets charged to it. But we can put that into Have I Been Pwned, into the Stripe component, and it can charge the card immediately, create the subscription, create the invoice. All of that goes to the reseller. The reseller can then communicate with the customer and say, hey, your subscription's now good to go, you're onboarded. But it just feels so dirty. There's just something about this entity that sits in the middle and adds no value whatsoever that I can see. And again, when I was at Pfizer, there was always this one in particular that we had to use for everything. And I'd go and find, let's say it's like the Redgate tools or something. SQL Compare. I want to buy SQL Compare, and it's a $200 purchase. And I go to redgate.com, $200, and I've got my Pfizer credit card here. And they'll say, no, you need to go to the reseller and get them to buy it. You get the catalog. There used to be a physical catalog back in the day. You go to their online catalog and it's not on there. So then you got to get in touch with the reseller and say, hey, look, I'd really like to be able to purchase this service. Like what do we have to do? And then they would try and negotiate backwards and forwards with Redgate, which is what they try and do with us. They try and negotiate a price. And of course, we just don't negotiate. It's like, that's the price. Often a reseller's like, we want you to sign our agreement. No. We outright refuse to do any documentation from the customer for online credit card purchases. Because again, they start at $3.95. You want me to fill out your 200 question security questionnaire for $3.95. And you know what? If it was $395, I still wouldn't do it because I hate them. They're painful. I want to be here processing data breaches and writing code and messing with IoT. I don't want to be there filling out your stupid security questionnaire. This is escalating, isn't it? So it makes it extraordinarily hard with the resellers. And a lot of the problem is that there are certainly cases where organizations are like, look, you have to put everything through the resellers. But the resellers are often only there to solve the problem of the company not wanting to use the credit card. So if either the company uses a credit card, which obviously, whichever way we measure it, well over 90% of all of our customers do, or if Stripe comes up with a solution that would allow us to do direct debits, we could cut a massive portion of the reseller paying away. And you'd get the product for free too. Well, so did I say free? No, you get the product for a lot less because you're not paying the reseller markup. Scott says I'm closing the video for talking about resellers. I want to. I got to start collecting these. I want to do a blog post of just the dumb shit we get from resellers and Neville's. And Scott, I know you've got a bunch of these too, mate. It's the profoundly stupid stuff. And I think part of the problem, I just feel, I have this image that the people that are there staffing the resellers have no soul or life or purpose. That they're soulless creatures. That's just what it feels like. It's nuts. Stephen, yay, SQL Compare. I work on the team. Oh, very good. Yeah. That literally was one of the scenarios. It was a combination of SQL Compare, SQL Data Compare, SQL Prompt. What else were we using? My Redgate relationship goes back, I'm sure, 20 years. So anyway, where does that leave us? I feel a bit better for getting all that off my chest. I think where it's left us is this blog post obviously did some rounds inside Stripe, which is great. This is kind of what I wanted. I've got a great Stripe connection. I am going to be spending some time with Stripe as well, I hope, in my upcoming travels, which we'll talk about next. And I think what we'll see over time, I mean, that the pre-beta, pre-billing thing is obviously there in beta. My feeling in discussions with Stripe is that they really understand challenges like this. And Charlotte and I sat here for half an hour the other day and explained exactly what these challenges were. They are not unique to us. Everything I've described is online, digital, B2B sort of services. It is bread and butter 101 of that style of payment. And I do genuinely feel that Stripe understands that, and that somewhere within their pipeline are the things that they've already spoken about publicly, disclosed to us, or have in their back pocket at the moment. They'll start filling in those gaps more. The challenge with working in such a heavily regulated industry, I think, is going to make it harder to do things like not necessarily direct debits, but EFT payments. But this should be a solvable solution as well. You know, we're an Aussie entity. It shouldn't matter that we're charging in USD. We've got customers all around the world that pay with source bank accounts from different currencies. We should be able to have this same sort of virtual credit card, or rather virtual bank account model in Australia. So I just learned that apparently they had their sort of annual event in Sydney last week, which I'm really bummed I just learned about, because I would have liked to have seen that. Stripe is a really, really important part of what we do with Have I Been Pwned now, because they facilitate effectively joining customers to the service. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't think I've really solved anything too significant at the moment, but maybe some of that beta stuff will have some good in it as well. All right, let's talk about travel, and then I think we're going to wrap it up, because I've got less to talk about in breaches than what I thought I was going to, and I'll explain why in a moment. I did just put out a blog post about the North American Have I Been Pwned tour. Sounds kind of stupid now I read it like that. The last time Charlotte and I were in the US was in 2019. We both had a lot of US travel in 2019, and it was a combination of, we had NDC Minneapolis in Minnesota. So we were there doing that. We had an NDC event in New York. I had, was it 2019? I think I had a Pluralsight event in New York as well. Yeah, it was. And then I went to Atlanta, and yeah, okay, I forgot. That was somewhere else I went to as well. Because Pluralsight had a customer day at a racetrack where I got to talk about data breaches and then drive Porsches around the racetrack for the afternoon. It was a win-win. That was 2019. We were in Vegas with Scott in August in 2019 doing the annual Vegas events. And it was a weird time for many reasons. Many personal reasons, as many of you know. Scott knows intimately. And then, of course, it was just before the COVID situation. So once that kicked in, no one was going anywhere. Now, we have been traveling again for, I want to say, the last couple of years. But the US, for reasons I still don't understand, like COVID happened, and shortly after COVID, going anywhere was really expensive. And then Europe came back to pretty much where it was pre-COVID, or close to it. The US has remained exorbitantly expensive to travel to, like significantly more. Even just to go from here to LA, which we can do in one hop, is way more expensive than going from here all the way to Oslo. So it was just a really expensive trip as well. And we're sort of going, Is there a good obviously we go to Norway a lot because Charlotte and visiting Scott, but and lots of good business reasons too. But the US, we just didn't have a good enough reasons for. But we do have so many different partners that we work with there. And obviously there's a lot out there in the public domain about the relationship with the FBI and the data they feed into the service. The US government is one of the, I think, 36 now governments that use Have I Been Pwned at a national cert level as well. And then there are the relationships with the likes of Stripe and Cloudflare and so many other platform providers that we use as part of Have I Been Pwned. And we sort of thought this was a good time. We had a little bit of a sort of a few-week window there where we could travel. And we thought, well, why don't we go and we'll put the feelers out, we'll see who wants to catch up, and then we'll just see how it works out from there. So that's what we did. And we ended up just finding enough interest that we booked travel, the bookends, getting over there, getting back, and then we thought, we'll fill out everything else in between. So what we ended up working out is we're going to be in Washington, D.C. This begins at the end of next month, and Pittsburgh. And then one of the organizations I pinged and went, look, we really should catch up because we have a good connection as 1Password, this week's sponsor. My favorite password manager, as it has been, I think, since 2011 now. And it turns out that they're doing this President's Cup sponsorship, which I spoke about at the beginning of this podcast. So that's in Montreal, which is pretty handy to Washington, D.C. and Pittsburgh. I think it was like a 1-hour flight. So we're going to be at the President's Cup in Montreal. I was last in Montreal in 2018 doing a keynote for a company I can't remember now. Who were they? They're like a biotech. Anywho, it was nice. So we will be there. We will then be in Ottawa because Ottawa is the capital of Canada, and that is where some of the government and law enforcement folks are there. So we'll drop by and see our friends on that corner of the world. We have a bit of a gap, and then we'll be in San Francisco for the end of it. Now, San Francisco is obvious. This is where Cloudflare, Stripe, and many others are located. This gap in the middle, we want to try and have a bit of downtime. Like in the back of my mind, I was like, let's go to like some epic ranch in Montana or something. It'll be like big mountains and we'll just be like sitting there drinking beer, watching the sunset. Like it'd be awesome. If you have any good ideas or anything like that, that's just a super cool place that we should go. Please let me know. That is the travel plans. And I've put this out here in a blog post because I did something similar at the start of 2018 and a bunch of people came out of the woodwork and went, hey, come and say g'day in, I think the places we went at the time was Twitter, Facebook, Uber, Coinbase, I think Riot Games, or did I see them in LA? A bunch of others in a similar sort of space. And we just went in there and had a casual chat. I remember Facebook was particularly cool because I got this massive campus in Silicon Valley, walking around there, chatting to the InfoSec guys, having some barbecue. They got like a barbecue shop on the campus. So anyway, that's what's coming up. We're going to have limited time, but if you're in any of those areas, then please let me know. Someone's just told me I spelled Ottawa wrong. Ottawa. I'll fix that. Anyway, if you're in those places, let me know and we'll see what we can do. Now, last thing, weekend data breaches. Just quickly going through the ones that were loaded. There was another one that I was going to have loaded before I spoke today, but I'm just not confident enough that the organisation has been given sufficient opportunity on this one. I'm going to talk about that next week because by then it certainly will be live. But I've had to try a little bit harder to get this through to them. In that last week, what have we seen? Tradery, 400,000 records from Tradery, which apparently is like an online trading platform. It looks like it's used a lot for people with Roblox, trading digital assets. French sporting manufacturer Sport 2000, they were in the news earlier this year, 3.2 million email addresses, names, physical addresses, dates of birth, because apparently you need that to buy a baseball or whatever they sell. Phone numbers and purchases, 59% already in Have I Been Pwned. There is another one that I will push out later today that is fairly recent. I have been in touch with their support. Their support has said something to the effect of, if we feel like we need to get back to you, we will. And I was like, okay, I'm going to load the data tomorrow. Let me know if you have anything that you'd like to say in advance. So we'll see how that pans out. That is another one from the European corner of the world. The one that is sitting in the pipeline at the moment that was going to be out is the American corner of the world. And I'm sure there'll be other stuff between now and then as well. Both of those in single-digit millions as well. So reasonably sizable. All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up there. It's getting sunny outside. We're still heading for 32 degrees, so I'm going to go out and enjoy the weather. Catch you next week.